Hi, I'm Mary.
And I'm Katie, and this is The Housewife Did It.
True Crime Edition.
Mary's turn again.
No more John Bonet.
Sorry, JonBenet.
But I do have a two-parter. My first two-parter.
Nice.
I told Sammy last night, I said, oh no, it's 14 pages. And he said, oh my God. So.
For both parts?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. The first part's only 5, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I think that's after I added the real-time true crime. So it's probably more like 13 pages. Anyway, yeah. If you like our show, if you're gonna miss JonBenet Ramsey's case, like, subscribe, share, follow, and maybe you'll find more cases that you like. I do have 3 real-time true crimes for you. So we'll do those first. First up, a 6th grade girl in Texas named Yoselin Rojo Carranza died by suicide after her classmates relentlessly bullied her and told her her parents would be taken by ICE and that she would end up alone. That happened just days after the White House tweeted a Valentine's Day card featuring Donald Trump's face that said, "Come here illegally and we'll deport you." Now, the White House could...
I was going to say, the White House since then has...
Yeah. But the White House could have taken this as an opportunity to clear up their immigration policies, since a lot of y'all are saying that they are only deporting criminals.
Not a lot of y'all.
Yeah, a lot of
we
them.
Hope. But
they could have taken this as an opportunity to condemn hate speech, but instead they posted an Instagram reel of deportation ASMR and then declared Donald Trump King of America. So.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we may
no end in sight there.
More children.
Yeah. The body of a 24-year-old trans man named Sam Nordquist was found in a field in upstate New York more than a month after he went missing. Nordquist lived in Minnesota prior to his disappearance, but was staying somewhere called Patty's Lodge, which was a motel in the Finger Lakes region. Authorities on the scene where his body was found described his murder as beyond depraved and by far the worst homicide investigation that our office has ever been a part of.
Oof.
Yeah. Noting that Sam had been repeatedly beaten and sexually assaulted with various objects. So, Sam
for
Nordquist,
over a month.
Yeah.
Like, I think they've proven that, like, he was held.
He was
for
being
over
held there,
a month.
yes.
Yeah.
So Sam Nordquist was an aide at a group home for adults with disabilities. He was an animal lover and a good friend with a heart of gold, according to his loved ones. 5 people have been arrested and are in police custody in connection with Sam's murder. They are 38-year-old Precious Arzwaga, 30-year-old Patrick Goodwin, 19-year-old Emily Matika, 30-year-old Jennifer Quijano, and 33-year-old Kyle Sage. Why is there a 19-year-old in there?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Who brought their kid sister along? Like, yeah. Come on.
So evidently, Sam thought that Precious Arzwaga was his girlfriend. They had been, yeah. Is that
why he went there? No, he got catfished.
Well, I don't think he got catfished. They had been talking online and he had traveled to New York to meet her in the fall. So I think this was like his second time coming to visit her. So I think she was who she said she was, but I think she also was a hate crimer. The 5 suspects face charges of second-degree murder and depraved indifference, which holds a sentence of 15 years to life. So, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Last one, ending on a good note. Apparently, genealogical DNA has identified Jack the Ripper as Aaron Kosminski. He was a hairdresser who died in 1919, but he was high up on the suspect list. So it's not someone that came out of nowhere.
Sure.
I cannot wait to hear Morbid's comment on this because they are so obsessed with like who was Jack the Ripper. So I'm excited to see what they say.
Nice.
But yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Does
That's
it
pretty cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. Does it really matter?
Because, yeah, like, I think it'd be hard to think that, like, you can trace it back 130 years later. But if they found someone related to a person who is already on their suspect list, they're pretty sure, like, cool.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. All right.
Good
ready?
work. Yes.
Do you know anything about this case?
I do not. I do not.
Yeah. Okay.
I did catch a glimpse of one of the pictures in our drive or our album.
Which one?
There's a vehicle.
I uploaded a few pictures of vehicles.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know nothing.
Yeah. Some of them aren't her vehicle.
You said yeah. You know nothing.
Idiot.
Bitch.
Okay. Ready?
Yes.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
At 7:27 p.m. on Monday, February 9th, a woman heard a car crash on a sharp corner of Route 112 near her home in Woodsville, New Hampshire, near Haverhill. A few minutes later, the same accident was reported by a passing motorist. On his way home, he stopped by the scene of the accident and asked the woman involved if she needed help, but she said she had already called roadside assistance. So he decided he wasn't going to push, but he did go home and call the police to alert them of the accident anyway. They arrived on scene at 7:46 p.m., but when they got there, the young woman had disappeared. Police were able to trace the vehicle back to Maura Murray, a 21-year-old nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. They filed a missing persons report for her, and to this day, her whereabouts remain unknown. Crime Junkie.
I hate when you do this to me.
I was about to say, when Crime Junkie covered Bryce Loves Pizza, they said he's the female Maura Murray case.
The male Maura
Murray. Yes, he's the male Maura Murray case. So I was gonna say, kind of get in that headspace. I know. So we're gonna go back a few days to February 5th, 2004, to set the scene for Maura's state of mind at the time of her disappearance and some of the circumstances that make her disappearance so odd. So, on the evening of the 5th, Maura was at work at her campus security job when she got a call from her older sister, Kathleen. She seemed fine at the end of the phone call, but around 3 hours later at 10:30 p.m., Maura broke down in tears at work and just kept saying, "My sister," was all she was saying. A few hours later, her supervisor came to Maura's desk and noticed that she was unresponsive and zoned out. So at around 1:20 a.m., Maura's supervisor walked her back to her dorm room. At the time of Maura's disappearance, Kathleen told investigators that she and Maura had just had a normal conversation. They talked about boy problems, and she didn't really see any reason why Maura would have been that upset over the call. So they were like, I don't know, red herring. On February 7th, Maura's dad, Fred Murray, went to Amherst to take Maura car shopping because Maura's car had been experiencing some issues. It was making like some disturbing sounds, like clunking sounds, and black smoke was coming out of her tailpipe when she drove the car.
Concern.
After looking for a car, Fred took Maura and one of her friends out for dinner before going back to his motel. He let Maura borrow his new Toyota Corolla, which she drove to a party in a dorm room on campus. Other party attendees said that she arrived at 10:30 p.m. and stayed until 2:30 a.m. At 3:30 a.m., as she was driving back to the motel, Maura hit a guardrail on Route 9 in Hadley, Massachusetts, which caused $10,000 worth of damage to the Corolla.
Jeez.
Yes. The police were called to the scene of the accident and an accident report was filed, but the report did not have any note of field sobriety tests. That doesn't necessarily mean they didn't do one.
Sure.
But they didn't write it down. And I have recently become aware of that maybe being a thing. I don't know if that's like a thing.
Sure.
Maybe if they pass the sobriety test, they don't even put it down. I don't know.
Yeah. It seems like a huge oversight.
Yeah.
That would
Police,
be helpful if you would just write it down.
Police drove Maura to her father's motel so she could stay with him for the time being. At 4:49 a.m., a call was placed to Maura's boyfriend from Fred's cell phone. The contents of the call was never disclosed, though, and I think the assumption is that, like, it was Maura calling her boyfriend from her dad's phone. We just don't know what was said. Later in the morning, Fred was able to speak with his insurance company about the damage to the Corolla and procure a rental car. So he dropped Maura off at school and headed home. She was very upset about this accident. She was very upset about the damage to the car. She thought her dad was going to be mad at her. She was just she felt very guilty about it, and like she was very distraught. They said she was like crying when he dropped her back off. She was crying all night. She was very upset about it. He called her that night at like 11:30 p.m. to tell her that she needed to get some accident forms from the Massachusetts Registry of Motor Vehicles so that they could they would fill them out together. He said she could call him back the next night and he would help her fill them out so that they could do an insurance claim. About an hour later, Maura's computer showed that she searched MapQuest for directions to the Berkshires and Burlington, Vermont. And that's it for the 8th.
Okay.
On February 9th, classes had been canceled for the day due to a snowstorm. At 1 p.m., Maura sent an email to her boyfriend, which read, quote, "I love you more, stud. I got your messages, but honestly, I didn't feel like talking too much of anyone. I promise to call you today, though. Love you, Maura." End quote. She then made a call to a condo company in Bartlett, New Hampshire, where her family had previously vacationed, to ask about a rental. That call lasted for 3 minutes, and when interviewed, the owner claimed that they were not planning on renting a condo to Maura. I don't know why, but
How do they
said
remember
no.
that?
I think, like, maybe because her family had stayed there before, that they were like, oh yeah, she asked about renting from us, but we said no. Then at 1:13 p.m., Maura called a classmate within her nursing program. Again, the contents of this call was not disclosed. We don't know what they talked about. At 1:24 p.m., Maura emailed the faculty supervisor of the nursing school to tell them she would be out of town for the week due to a death in her family and that she would contact them when she returned. According to her family, there was no death, so that was not true. At 2:05 p.m., Maura called about booking a hotel in Stowe, Vermont, and that call lasted about 5 minutes. At 2:18 p.m., Maura called her boyfriend and left him a voicemail saying they would talk later. Maura then packed some clothing, toiletries, textbooks, and birth control pills into her car. At around 3:30 p.m., Maura drove away from her dorm room in her 1996 Saturn sedan. At 3:40 p.m., Maura withdrew $280 from an ATM. She was seen on CCTV footage at the ATM, but it wasn't very telling other than proving she was alone. In the
And
footage,
like alive,
yeah,
like,
and then it was her getting the money.
sure.
In the ATM footage, her family does point out that the jacket she's wearing is not one they've ever seen before, and it seems to be too big for her. So they kind of wonder if it belonged to someone else.
Sure. Like, is someone in the car?
Right.
Well, she, yeah.
Yeah. She then drove to a liquor store and spent $40 on Bailey's Kahlua, a bottle of vodka, and a box of Franzia wine.
Okay.
A steal?
Yeah. Get it, girl. That sounds like quite a night.
Yeah. This liquor store was also able to provide CCTV footage, which again showed her alone. She then drove to the Registry of Motor Vehicles to pick up the accident report forms. Maura called to check her voicemail at 4:37 p.m., and this was the last time her cell phone was used, based on her cell phone data. At around 7 p.m., a resident in Woodsville reportedly heard a loud thump outside of her house, and when she looked out her window, she saw a car crashed up against a snowbank on Wild Amanusick Road. The car was pointing west on the eastbound side of the road. The woman called the Grafton County Sheriff's Department at 7:27 p.m. to report the accident. In the call, the woman reported to police that she saw a man smoking a cigarette inside the car after it was up against the snowbank. Later, though,
He said, I'm gonna be here a while. Might as well.
Later, though, she clarified that she basically assumed it was a man smoking a cigarette. What she actually saw was a red light inside the car. And she said maybe it could have been from a cell phone charging, not necessarily a cigarette. Another resident in the area passed the scene and stopped when he saw a young woman walking around the car. He stopped and offered to call for help, but said that she pleaded with him not to call anyone because she had already called AAA.
Okay.
AAA never showed up or had any record of a call from this area at this time. And the man who she said this to didn't believe her because there was no cell reception in the area. So he lived there. He was like, my cell phone has never worked here.
Yeah.
So there's no way you call AAA.
And pleading, I feel like you just be like,
please don't call AAA.
Don't worry, I already called.
Yeah.
But what would 2 calls matter?
Right.
But if she's like, do not do it.
Yeah. So he went home and he called the police at 7:43 p.m. Another witness claimed to have seen a police SUV facing the car at 7:37 p.m., but that did not match with the police records because the police record said that the police arrived at 7:46 p.m.
But do we trust the police in this case,
Mary? We will come back to that in part 2.
Okay.
When they arrived at the scene, police could not find the driver of the car. They noted that the car had hit a tree on the driver's side. This is the first mentioning of a tree. Before, all the witnesses said it was crashed into a snowbank.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying it crashed into a tree, and
the police.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that it damaged the left headlight and pushed the car's radiator into the fan, which made it impossible to drive. I will say, I don't know how hard a snowbank is in Massachusetts, but looking at the damage to her car, I don't think it was caused by simply a snowbank.
Yeah, they get pretty hard though.
But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
But I mean, windshield, I know I'm like, was there a tree hidden in the snowbank?
Yeah. The windshield was cracked on the driver's side and both airbags had deployed. Interestingly, because there was no one around, the car was locked, which meant that they would have to wait for a search warrant before they could look inside the car. But they did get that warrant. And inside the car, officers found red stains, specifically on like the driver's side of the car, in and outside of the car. But when they tested it, it turned out to be red wine from a tear in that Franzia box.
That's so unfortunate.
I know. Police found an empty beer bottle.
Wait, like she took it with her?
The box?
Yeah.
No, like,
oh, okay. I'm like picturing she's trying to get out of the car. She's like, let me take this with me, and it's like leaking as she goes.
No, they found these red stains, and then they saw that the box was torn. I don't even think they tested it. I think they were just like, oh, like the box is torn, so this must be from that. Sure. And like the impact would have like splattered it. They found an empty beer bottle, a AAA card issued to Maura Murray, blank accident report forms, gloves, CDs, makeup, diamond jewelry, printed driving directions to Burlington, Vermont, Maura's favorite stuffed animal, and a book about mountain climbing in the White Mountains of New Hampshire inside the car. What police could not find were Maura's debit card, credit cards, cell phone, and some of the liquor from that recent liquor store visit. Police were able to trace the car to Maura Murray and considered her a missing person who may have disappeared voluntarily and considered there to be no evidence of foul play. They did find a rag stuffed into her tailpipe, and they said, that's weird.
That's suspicious.
But then her dad said that he told her to put it there so that the black smoke wouldn't come out of the car and get her pulled over. That's smart. That's so smart. Between 8 and 8:30 p.m., a contractor on Route 12, about 4 to 5 miles east of where Maura's car was found, said they saw a young person wearing jeans and a dark coat with a light-colored hood. Around the same time, EMS and a fire truck arrived at the car.
Is that the same jacket as at the ATM camera? Was it dark with white hood? Do we know?
I do know what it looks like. It's like a whitish gray jacket, but it's got like darker gray on the ends of the sleeves and around the collarbone, and then the hood is that whitish gray. So yes. The Saturn was towed at 8:49 p.m. and at 9:30 p.m. the responding officers left. Let me show you the jacket.
Okay.
Also, this is going to be in part 2, but this photo was taken in 2003. Her family said they'd never seen this jacket before, other than the CCTV footage. But so yes, like it
doesn't necessarily look like a dark jacket to me.
No, it's not. But I think that like the fact that it's dark on the collar and then the hood is light, I could see why they would describe it that way.
Sure.
Because the hood and the part right underneath the hood are different. Yeah. At 9:30 p.m., the responding officers left. A summary of the incident read, quote, at a hairpin turn, she went off the road. Her car hit a tree. At that point, a person came along who was driving a bus. It was a neighbor. He asked her if she needed help. She refused. About 10 minutes later, police showed up to the scene and Maura Murray was gone. End quote.
Why he driving a bus?
He was a bus driver.
Yeah, it's like 7:30 at night though. But okay.
They call him they say the bus driver. But I think also like I think in some areas, like if you're a bus driver, you keep the bus at your house.
Yeah.
I think I don't think that's true in all areas, but I have seen that before. So I think he was just coming home.
Sure. Okay.
At 12:36 p.m. on the 10th, a BOLO report was issued for Maura, in which she was described as having been last seen wearing a dark coat, jeans, and a black backpack. Again, I would not call that a dark coat. I could see why they would specify dark with a light hood
Yeah,
because
but
of
like
that
if you're coming up
distinction.
behind her,
But
it looks damn near reflective.
right, like that's, but if you're describing the coat as a whole, it is not a
Sure.
dark coat.
Yeah.
But I think also at that point, like again, the family saying they've never seen that jacket before, and all they have to go on is like maybe what jacket she was wearing in the previous days when her dad last saw her, or like from the CCTV footage, which is black and white.
Sure.
Maybe they just think it's a dark jacket. I don't know. Police called Fred Murray at 3:20 p.m. to tell him that they had found Maura's car wrecked and abandoned, but he did not answer. So the afternoon of the 10th is when they're finally contacting her family.
Okay.
One of his daughters then called him around 5 o'clock to tell him what had happened. So when they couldn't get a hold of Fred, they contacted one of Maura's sisters and said, "We found Maura's car wrecked and abandoned. We can't find her." So she called her dad. He called the Haverhill Police Department and they told him if she had not been found by the following morning, the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department would begin a search party. When police searched Maura's apartment, they found that almost all of Maura's belongings had been packed into boxes, and she had removed all of her art from the walls. She had then left a printed email on top of the boxes, which had been sent from her to her boyfriend and outlined relationship problems they had been dealing with. So that's weird.
Yeah, it's giving what is his name?
Bryce Loves Pizza?
No. The one
Daniel
I did.
Robinson? Daniel Robinson. Yeah.
Yeah, now I'm just like,
yes.
was she having a mental break right before?
So police like see these things and they're like, okay, she ran away.
Mm-hmm.
She packed up her entire life. On February
But all of it
11th,
was found in her house, right? Like there's not like a
yes.
missing luggage
Right.
bag. Okay.
Well, I mean,
But
so
still,
I think she had packed a duffel bag because she had packed like several things. Like she packed like clothes, toiletries, her medications, her favorite stuffed animal into her car,
sure.
and then had called to like book that hotel. So like she did have like a bag of things that she had taken with her, but she had also packed up her whole apartment like she was moving out.
Sure. Like
With
she would
her
come back
family,
for that stuff later.
yeah, her family had not heard that she was moving out.
Right.
Which at 21 years old, when you're still in college, you would probably tell them.
Yeah.
On February 11th, Fred made it to Haverhill, and the Fish and Game Department began their search at 8 a.m. Police offered Maura scent. Offered. Police offered Maura scent to tracking dogs using one of the gloves they had found. And the dog tracked her scent 100 yards east from where her car was found, but lost it in the middle of the road. So this caused investigators to believe she may have gotten into another car in this spot that then drove her somewhere. Further leading to this theory is the fact that Haverhill had just experienced a snowstorm. And the woods, when that snowstorm happened, the woods would have had a solid 2 feet of snow before Maura went missing, and no new snowfall after the accident, meaning they should have seen footprints if she had walked any other direction, like if she had been walking in the snow, especially into the wooded area or something.
Right. I would say, as a person very well versed in snow, I would also say that like if the snow bank is hard enough to do that to her car, meaning that like it's frozen solid, it's very, very cold, then the snow on the ground would also be hard and your footprints would be very distinct.
Right.
Like when it's like super pillowy soft, like sometimes there's just like it's kind of vague footprints.
It's like dusty.
But if you're like stepping into frozen snow, like your feet print are in there, you know?
And they didn't see any.
Right.
At 5 p.m., Maura's boyfriend and his family arrived in Haverhill. When he turned his phone back on after the flight, he had received a voicemail that he thought was from Maura, and it was just the sound of what he believed to be Maura crying and whimpering.
Okay.
Police traced the call back to a calling card issued by the American Red Cross. So we're going to get into this, but Maura's boyfriend went to West Point. That's where they met. And he had, I think they said that he had like received some sort of orders that the American Red Cross would have had to call him about. So like that wasn't unexpected, but then that he thought it was Maura crying was odd. But they can't like prove it.
Sure.
They didn't get to hear it.
Yeah.
And that was like as far as the lead took them. By 7 p.m., police had seemingly decided that Maura had either run away or completed suicide, but that it was her intention to disappear.
Yeah.
At 3:05 p.m. on February 12th, a press conference was released between Fred Murray, Maura's boyfriend. His name is Bill, by the way. I don't know why I haven't said that. I know his name. And police. In it, police theorized that Maura might be headed to the Kankamagus highway area, and they listed her as endangered and possibly suicidal.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they don't have like a body to check like BAC or anything, but like, did it seem like the alcohol had been drank?
So they found one empty beer bottle in the car.
You said that.
And then
but not like she was throwing back bottles of Baileys or like.
Well, but the Baileys and I think the vodka weren't in the car anymore when they got there. So it was on like the receipt and the CCTV footage, but yes, some of the alcohol she had purchased was missing.
Okay.
Which, if she was drinking, maybe she wanted to take those so that they wouldn't know she had been drinking. But
or maybe someone picked her up that she was already planning on going and hanging out with, and she was like, oh no, my Franzia has a hole in it. I'll just bring these with us to go continue this party. Okay. Just theorizing over here.
So we are gonna like wait to get into the theories in part 2, but you are
mark my words.
You are on the same wavelength as many people. Maura's loved ones disagreed with the theory that she was suicidal. Police stated that she may have been intoxicated, despite eyewitness accounts making no note of any impairment. So the people who saw her and spoke to her before police were called said that she did not seem that she was under the influence. The press conference concluded with the Haverhill police chief saying their top concern was that Maura had left upset or suicidal. So they're worried for her safety from herself. The following week, Fred and Bill went on CNN's American Morning, where they expressed their frustration with the police. They explained that they had to take the initiative to expand their search into Vermont because the Haverhill police had not notified authorities that Maura was missing, even though they found those directions to Burlington, Vermont. Nobody notified Vermont to be on the lookout for her. 10 days after Maura's disappearance, the FBI joined the investigation. They interviewed family members in Massachusetts and then spread the search for Maura nationwide. On that day, New Hampshire Fish and Game conducted additional ground searches using tracking and cadaver dogs and air searches using a thermal imaging camera. During the second ground search, one of Maura's sisters found a pair of women's white underwear ripped and lying in the snow on a private trail near French Pond Road. DNA tests were run on the underwear and they were not linked to Maura. By the end of the month, the Haverhill police had returned all of the items found in Maura's car to her family, And on March 2nd, the family checked out of their motel. Fred continued to travel to Haverhill most weekends to continue searching for Maura, but in April, police told him they had begun to receive complaints about him trespassing on private property. So, in April, both New Hampshire and Vermont police issued a press conference which stated, quote, "We believe Maura was headed for an unknown destination and may have accepted a ride in order to continue to that location," end quote. They clarified that they had no reason to believe that a crime had been committed or that there was anyone dangerous threatening the community.
Except whoever left those underwear, too. We
Yeah.
got a serial killer on the
No, they're
loose.
not concerned. They made a similar press release in June, but other than that, there wasn't much movement in the case until July. On July 1st, police took back the items from Maura's car from her family for forensic analysis. So they had released the items to the family and then said, wait, we want to run tests on those things.
Hopefully you didn't touch them too much.
On July 13th, this is crazy. On July 13th, the first search without snow was conducted.
Oh, no.
At this point, police were interested in finding the black backpack Maura had been wearing that day that hadn't been found in or around her car on the day of the crash. They searched a 1-mile radius with nearly 100 searchers, including state troopers, rescue personnel, and volunteers. At the end of the search, police stated that the search had been inconclusive. In November, Fred Murray appeared on the Montel Williams show to try to circulate more publicity on the case. Later in the year, so maybe like the next month, I guess, a man named Larry brought Fred Murray a rusty stained knife that he had taken from his brother Claude.
A gift.
Yeah. Claude lived less than a mile from where Maura's car had been found and had a criminal
that's in the
history.
mile radius.
Yeah. He had a criminal history. Larry claimed that Claude and his girlfriend had been acting strangely since the disappearance, and he believed that they had murdered Maura. A few days later, Claude took his Volvo to the scrapyard to dispose of it. The family of these two brothers then came forward to clear up what they believed had happened. They said that Larry had made up the story about his brother and girlfriend in order to get reward money. They also said that Larry had a history of drug use and they considered him to be unreliable. However, going back to that criminal history, something I find interesting is that Claude and this girlfriend that they're talking about, they met when she was 14 and he was 34.
Great.
They began their sexual relationship when she was 17 and he was 37.
Oh, wow.
He also, the criminal history we're talking about is a history of violence and an affinity for young women, girls. So, I just think that's worth pointing out.
Yeah. This is not like a person who's just like doing petty theft.
Yeah, he's like, I don't know why my brother's making that up. He did take a lie detector test, but I have not been able to find the results of that test.
Oh, well, I would assume if he failed, we would know, but yeah, who knows?
In 2005, Fred Murray petitioned New Hampshire governor, I would assume, is what I meant to put.
Unless it was a new governor.
But I don't know why I capitalized it.
Oh, yeah.
Craig Benson to ask for help in continuing the search for Maura. On February 9th, the 1-year anniversary of Maura's disappearance, a service was held at the crash site. Soon after that, Fred Murray met with the new governor, John Lynch.
Oh.
And that one is new governor because not capitalized. On November 1st of 2005, somebody named Tom Davies posted an online forum dedicated to spreading information and awareness about Maura's case called Not Without Peril, which is the name of that hiking book that she had been reading when she disappeared. In his post, he claimed to have seen a black backpack similar to Maura's behind a restroom at Pemigewasset Overlook,
Incredible.
about 30 miles east of Woodsville on Route 112, shortly after Maura went missing. After the post, Senior Assistant Attorney General Jeffrey Strelzin made a statement confirming that law enforcement had been made aware of the backpack, but he did not clarify whether or not it had been collected and sent off for forensic testing.
Yeah, what? We thought y'all was still looking for the backpack.
He was like, "Oh yeah, we knew about that backpack.
We have that. Some we knew, yeah.
No, yeah,
we don't
we
even
knew
know
about
if we
that
have
backpack.
it.
Yeah. At the end of 2005, Fred Murray filed a suit against several law enforcement agencies, hoping to get them to open their case files up to him, but it doesn't seem like that worked.
Yeah.
On the day Maura disappeared, this is so crazy to me, Facebook was 5 days old.
Wow.
Yeah. There was no Twitter, and there was no YouTube.
Oh.
Did you know that Facebook is older than YouTube?
Yeah, I guess I didn't.
YouTube's creation was still a year away.
Wow.
So when Maura initially went missing, it was not easy to garner attention for missing persons cases online. Yeah. But the longer she stayed missing, her case became known as the first crime mystery of the social media age. In 2005, Maura's case gained traction on web sleuths. In 2007, pages dedicated to finding Maura Murray were created on both Facebook and MySpace, and since then, countless online forums and message boards have been created to share information about her case. In 2014, a Boston Magazine article by Bill Jensen noted, quote, "Now at least online, it seems there's no such thing as a cold case. But when Maura Murray disappeared, the social web was in its infancy. And so you can read the history, other cases as a parable about the evolution of online sleuthing. On the internet, Maura's disappearance is the perfect obsession, a puzzle of clues that offers a tantalizing illusion. If the right armchair detective connects the right dots, maybe the unsolvable can be solved. And so every day, the case attracts new recruits, analyzing and dissecting and reconstructing the details of her story with a Warren Commission-like fervor." End quote.
Yeah, that is so interesting.
Yeah.
Like, and you just have to wonder, like, would it be solved if it had happened in 2015?
Right.
You know?
Like, because there have been like some sightings, like proposed sightings of Maura Murray, and we talked a little bit about like even that night people saying they saw her. So like it does make you wonder if that could have been, if pictures of her and information about her could have been circulated faster to the public, would more people have like been able to like claim that they saw her before like it had been like 2 months and they're like, "Oh my god, like I saw that missing girl."
Yeah.
In part 2, we're going to discuss the investigation beyond the first year of Maura's disappearance and some theories. But before we get there, I do want to like clear up some things about the original investigation and give some clarity on what was going on with Maura at the time she went missing. Because there are some things that like when police initially investigated them, the answers were different than what we know now. Sure. So I want to kind of clarify those things because I want you to go into part 2 like knowing those things.
With the correct stuff?
Yes. So first, when police spoke to Maura's sister about that phone call that they had that day Maura was at work, she was adamant that they had only talked about boy problems and that it could not have been upsetting enough to warrant the reaction Maura's coworkers described. However, several years later, her sister did admit that she lied about that Maura,
just because she wanted them to take it seriously and like not think it was just a
I think she lied because of I think she lied because of what the conversation was about.
Oh, okay.
So she said that she does know why Maura was upset with her. She does understand why it was a strong reaction. Basically, when she called Maura that day, it was upon her release from an alcoholic rehabilitation center. She had just been released. Yeah, she had just been released from the rehab center, and she called Maura to tell her that her fiance had picked her up from the center and driven her immediately to a bar where she relapsed. And that this was what had caused Maura to break down into tears and, oh my God, there's a bird on break down into tears and start yelling, my sister, my sister. So she, there is a documentary or docuseries that I watched about Maura Murray's disappearance, and this is, I don't know if it's the first time that she admits this, but it's one of the first times that she admits that that she had lied. And the woman who made the series, the investigator, was like, that would certainly upset me. So like, now do you see why she, like, does it make sense to you that that was her reaction? And she's like, yes, like I could, like, because some people might not have an extreme reaction to that, but she's like, I do get why she thought that. However, there were also boy problems going on. So this is referenced a few times in the initial investigation, both in the conversation with her sister and the email to her boyfriend that she had printed and left on one of her moving boxes. So according to people who knew Bill and Maura, there was infidelity on both sides of their relationship. Okay. In a lot of the source material, Bill Rausch is referred to as Maura's ex-boyfriend. Like at the time of her disappearance, that they weren't together anymore. Bill was still a student at West Point, which is where he and Maura had met. So their relationship had recently become long distance, and she was going to UMass when she disappeared. At first, their friends say they tried to visit each other often, but eventually that became too difficult, and they would really only reconnect during holidays. Like, they would talk on the phone and stuff and email, but they only saw each other during holidays. Bless you. Thank you. According to some sources, Bill had cheated on Maura, but it has been confirmed that Maura had been having an affair with a UMass track coach named Hussein Baghdadi. Hussein, who went by the nickname Haas, was interviewed by a blogger who writes about Maura's case, and he mentioned that, according to Maura, Bill was very controlling of her and she wanted to get away from him. He also alleged that Bill could be physically abusive to Maura and that she felt she couldn't get away from his constant checking up on her and demanding things of her. He also said that Maura would sometimes fantasize about disappearing and starting a new life in Mexico. So he said when he found out that she had disappeared, he thought, like, oh shit, like, she did it. She went to Mexico. In 2011, a woman came forward who had worked with Bill Rausch at a company called Ray Group International with allegations that he had attempted to rape a woman in the office of the company president on St. Patrick's Day. Bill was fired from this position after this incident, and since then, other women have come forward to report that during intimate relationships with Bill, he forced them to role play as Maura Murray while he choked them.
Oh!
Yeah. His coworker took him to court for, the coworker I mentioned before, took him to court for her sexual assault, and Bill took a plea deal in which he would plead guilty to felony third-degree sexual assault and would either serve 180 days in prison, or pay a $1,000 fine.
Okay.
So I believe what Hussein said about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So lastly, we're going to discuss Maura's departure from West Point and her transfer to UMass. At West Point, Maura began as a chemical engineering major and ran on the track team. During her time at West Point, Maura was allegedly struggling with an eating disorder. The people in her life said that like this wasn't something she disclosed to them, but after her disappearance, they found some books about how to deal with eating disorders, and that's why they thought that. In her third semester at West Point, Maura was caught shoplifting makeup, about $5 worth of makeup.
Oh, wow.
When asked why she did it, she said she didn't know. Ashley Flowers from the Crime Junkie podcast speculates that maybe Maura did it as a way out of West Point because she wasn't happy there. Either way, Maura knew that West Point was going to expel her for it. So before they could do that, she chose to transfer, claiming that like she wanted to be closer to home. So she started going to UMass. When she got to UMass, she changed her major to nursing, and she seemed to be doing better. But then she was arrested in November of 2003 for credit card fraud.
Mm.
She had used a stolen credit card to order pizza, and when she was arrested and confronted with this, she admitted to stealing another student's credit card number and was put on probation, I think by the school. So a lot of people point to those things as okay, she was clearly running away and trying to start a new life because she was in all this trouble and dealing with all of these things, and I think that's fair to speculate, but just to kind of give you a full picture of what was going on in her life at that time. And then when we do part 2, we'll talk about what happens after 2005 with the search, and then I'll get into the nitty gritty of the theories. But do you have any thoughts so far?
No, just that closing part I think sounds like things are messier or more complex than originally might have perceived.
Right.
I got my eyes on Bill.
Yeah. She I think and truthfully, not to give too much away, but Bill doesn't come back up as a suspect really much at all.
Well, and I was gonna ask, but it's such a specific situation that he would have to have been alibi-less and found to be there, you know, I would think.
And he wasn't there. He was at he was at West Point when she disappeared, because he had to fly. He flew in the next day, so they know where he was. But I certainly think that that Hussein's claims that he had been physically abusive to Maura are probably true.
Yeah.
But yes, one of the things I think I see most about this case is people saying that Maura has this perfect image curated of herself, or this perfect persona, and after she went missing, that was really torn apart.
Yeah.
And I think that is what makes it such a big mystery for people, is seeing that she did have so much going on in her life that it would be reasonable to conclude that she disappeared, but also her family is so sure that she was future oriented, and I wonder if that has a lot to do with the fact that she was dealing with a lot of these things under the surface.
Sure. Yeah, it's true. Very confusing.
Yeah.
And this is a very specific thing for me to be stuck on, but it's just very rare that it like involves like a car, and then it's like this is very clearly, or maybe not, but like on the surface it seems like very clear that this, if foul play occurred, like it had to just be like opportunity, like she just happened to crash her car, you know, like Bill did not come and like crash her car, you know. So it's like it's not just like she up and
like
disappeared one day, like we have evidence that like an accident occurred. It's just
and
then what?
Like we said the same thing about like Brysla's Pizza, that like if somebody harmed him, or in this case Maura, like they would have just had to happen to stumble upon him. I think the difference that I see is that Maura like disappeared in like the span of like 10 minutes. Between when the last witness talked to her and when police arrived. And Brysla's Pizza was kind of out in the area he disappeared in for like hours. But like
the 10 minutes makes it seem more like
10 minutes. And I think
makes
it's like
it seem
obvious,
more like she talked to that guy and then walked off.
Yeah. I think it's obvious that she got into a car in the middle of the street. That's why her scent disappears there. I think it's just we're not sure what happened next.
Yeah, did she hitchhike, get into a random car? Did someone meet her there? When she told the guy she had already called AAA, had she already called a person? Or, no, the problem is there's no cell service. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the other thing, is like people are like, oh, like it had to either be a stranger or like some kind of like tandem car situation. But then I think that makes people think like, oh, well, if she got into somebody's car that she knew, she obviously started a new life. But like we don't know what that person had in mind for her. She could have trusted them and they did harm her. Like we don't know. So we'll get into that in part 2.
Cool. Good job, guys. Go check out our new merch.
Yes, it's so fun.
So fun.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.